So the genesis was a question, and the question was, if you could build anything in the world, what would you build? Let's make something we can drive to the Baja, race 1,000 miles, and drive home. In 1967, GM wanted to go after Jeep, and Vic Hickey, who's the guy who made the lunar rover that's sitting on the moon, got together with Hearst, and in 30 days, they built the original boot.
I started thinking about Steve McQueen's Baja boot, which I had bought about 10 years ago at an auction. And no one knew what it was, no one cared what it was. This is before the McQueen stuff went crazy and people paid $800,000 for the sports coat he wore and Bullet.
And the first time he came down to the Baja, he was afraid people would recognize him and not take him seriously. So he grew a little mustache when he went down here as a disguise, basically. Everybody still knew who it was.
What I wanted to do was to make a new version of Steve's boot that stayed true to that, but was like the ultimate SUV.
You can draw anything, but that doesn't mean you can build it. So the biggest challenge for us is to translate what we know from sports car racing with 8 24-hour on-road races and find a team who can help us translate that to an off-road vehicle.
The genesis of this project is really fascinating because it started with a phone call, and over the years I've had these phone calls. People call up, hey, I want to race Baja, and so song and dance, and normally nothing happens of it.
So I called SCORE, I spoke to the technical director, Jose. I told him who I was and what I wanted to do, and he said, well, I have this friend Darren you should talk to. And so I called Darren, and Darren said, well, it's a crazy idea, but let me think about it, let me take a look at the boot. And he came, we met, and he said, you know what, if you want to do it, we'll do it. And I said, look, what I want to do though is have a road legal version that you could race with.
I knew the Baja boot. Everybody who's raced here knows the story and seen the pictures, and I took a deep breath. I thought, wow, that's a really interesting idea, because you're right, the Baja boot's super cool, but the technology's moved on, and I was fascinated.
We shipped the original boot out to Elliott at Armada, and we had it there for the whole engineering process. And they looked at the chassis, and they looked at the engine placement and everything. The chassis is very, very similar. The engine placement, the engine being front to back, sort of a mid-engine car, but front to back, the two-wheel, four-wheel drive architecture is very, very similar.
And also with Elliott from Pollock, from Armada Engineering, who ended up hiring him and his guys, have done an outstanding job, and been really great to work with. So they were critical in this whole process. The actual engineering of the car was done there at Armada. The CAD was all drawn, and then the prototype was built there.
The boot makes every day the Baja 1000. And so I want people to look at the boot and have fun. You can't look at it, you can't drive it and not have fun, not have a smile on your face. And Elliott, he said, I'm tempted to just turn around and go back into the desert and drive it all weekend. You don't want to stop.
We've had people drive it for the first time, not off-road people, including Jim and Jesse Glickenhaus, who don't have any off-road experience, and just to see their faces when they get in the car and drive it reminds you of that first time you jumped in an off-road car.
The amazing thing to me is in 1969, the original Bronco raced the original boot. And the Bronco won 1 year in the 1,000 mile, and the boot won in the 500 mile. So it was a real legitimate rivalry, Chevy versus Ford and all of that stuff. I mean, it was fantastic. And then crazily enough, 50 years later, Ford is here with their Bronco, and we're here with our boot, and we're going to be racing each other in the same class. So it's really kind of cool.
We didn't plan it that way, but it's history coming around, and we get another chance.
big companies have to operate a certain way, and I understand that. And they're corporate, and they have motorsports divisions, and they have marketing divisions, and they have engineering divisions. And the guys that were there were old school and were enjoying themselves, and they were real legitimate racers. But I just got this flash, you know, we're different than Ford. We're not all wearing, you know, pristine Ford uniforms with Ford Motorsports written on it. We're kind of eclectic. Everybody wears what they want. We're more like old school. And I'm really happy about that.
And also the story that it tells when you drive. I mean, you come from a racetrack environment where you're driving around a 3-mile or 8-mile loop or 12-mile at the Nürburgring. You know, it's awesome. It's amazing performance, but it's very repetitive. Here, you do 100 miles and not see the same corner. So it's very tranquil. So I think when you see guys coming from other racing environments or driving experiences and coming into off-road, you get reminded, and that's refreshing. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's been a passion since I was a kid, and I love seeing that expression on people's faces when they go through their first whoops at 60 miles an hour, or, you know, jump a car or slide it in a corner, and then we all stop and check out, you know, the beach where we're at, or you know, have a great meal with amazing chefs down here. And it's like, I mean, you can't do that with a normal car, and I think that you know, that's the beauty of it. Well, to finish the Baja 1000, you got to have preparation. You got to do your homework on the course. You got to have a great team, and you got to have a little bit of luck. So, you know, making all those things match up is the important thing. You know, I've been very fortunate to win my class like 6 times down here, and I've finished a lot of races. But we've also, you know, seen some problems, and so with that, we try to draw on those experiences and not make the same mistakes again. So that's what we're kind of planning on.
Having this crazy race where things break and machines break and parts break, but then the camaraderie of people help each other out also is really special. For us, this is what racing should be. Somebody can come down with a friend, with a family member, and volunteer and help out, and it's how the pits were when my dad started getting into it. And you don't find that in motorsports so much, but it's wonderful to find it here.
But every time you show up, you know, you get thumbs up, and I've made lifelong friends here. You know, people that you know, that are an important part of my life, and I think everybody who's raced here for years has done that. The relationships kind of forges a bond between the two countries. The point now where other countries who put on off-road rallies, they call them Bajas. You know, so it's the generic name: Baja Italy, Baja Spain, Baja Porto Alegre. Even Baja India, you know, so that legacy is sort of spread out around the world, and I think that's something really cool that Baja can be proud of.
I'm much more interested in the experience and the journey, the whole trip that got us here. Being part of the build, of the design, of having phone calls with people and discussing what we're going to do. I mean, I never knew that this was the year it was going to be perhaps the most difficult course. The weather, which is a little unusual, has left it incredibly muddy. I think we have the right vehicle for it. We're 4-wheel drive. It's a very strong, durable thing, as evidenced by the road boot, the 3,000 miles we beat up on it off-road here in the Baja. So I think the race boot will do fine.
He bottomed out and he thought he shot out the third member. So I was checking the third member, so I'm just gonna put some more preload in there so he doesn't bottom out on some stuff.
Copy that. We're at BFG Pit 2 and the Bronco pit crews here as well, so I think they're going to be pulling the same pit together. We just had a really good pit stop over at BFG Pit 2 at about race mile 245. We got around the Ford Bronco and we pulled in the pit before them. We just did a splash of fuel, leveling down the dump can, and then looked the car over, sent it back on the road. The Bronco pulled in the pit right behind us, and they were in there for probably like 20 minutes. I had kind of a little catastrophe. They spilt fuel all over the place and had skid plates falling off. I think right now we're in a good position. Look like we're pulling away from the Bronco and looking good in the lead now.
It was okay, you know. I mean, we thought we'd lost the diff at the beginning, but there was a really nasty high harmonic sound in the drivetrain when it's in four-wheel drive, and then we took it out of four-wheel drive and it continued. So I thought I'd broken the rear diff, so I stopped, got out, everything looked good. This was like mile 30. Got back in. We lost about 45 minutes, you know. But then we just had a perfect day after that. So we just gotta keep on pushing, you know, step by step. You know, we'd worked for a year and a half, a year to build the car, with all the testing, team. We get Jono out of the car and try to before we pull the rear fenders off it. Everything had come down to that, and it all seemed to be going perfect, and then right at the end there, it all started a bit taken away from you. So all that emotion and energy was super draining. Boot project from the beginning, the goal was to finish the Baja 1000 with our street legal car and that we built. From that perspective, it was successful. We got to win our class, so now it was doubly successful, and we rekindled an old rivalry with the Ford Bronco, and coming out on top was a great story. So the amount of press that was generated from the participation of those two cars and the race that we had, and the fact that we finished was a huge success. And everybody that we picked for the team, it wasn't just their skill, but it was also their attitude that we wanted on the team, and that's what I looked for. And it doesn't matter whether it was, you know, the volunteers who are carrying the fuel down for the helicopter, or the guys working at the shop, or the film crew. Everybody that was part of this project came with a really good attitude and was pulling for the same goal. And that made the whole thing a pleasure. So, you know, I'm super proud of that. And as far as experiences I've had over the years, it has to be ranking up there with the top. So it's been the most exciting thing I've probably ever done in motorsports, to be honest with you.
Hey, this is David with Hagerty. If you like content like this, cruise on over to our YouTube channel, click and subscribe. We have all kinds of stuff out there. We have our redline rebuilds, we have barn find hunters, we have YI drives, we even scatter in some DIY videos that's information you haven't seen yet.